When you look at the modern marketplace, it can feel, well, it's just completely overwhelming. A chaotic landscape of digital disruption, rapid globalization, and just constant aggressive competition. But what if the map for conquering all that chaos was actually written about 2.5 millennia ago?
And that is the core, and frankly, a pretty audacious premise we're diving into today. We're looking at Mark R. McNeely's book, Sun Tzu and the Art of Business, 6 Strategic Principles for Managers.
This is such a fascinating exercise in strategic translation. McNeely takes Sun Tzu's Art of War, the text that was never intended for a corporate boardroom,
Right.
and he tries to translate its military concepts directly into a playbook for managers today.
Right, and our mission here is really to distill that core argument for you. How can this ancient text on battlefield victory become a practical strategy for, increasing profitability and dominating a market in the 21st century?
To even begin, you have to accept a central parallel that he sets up right from the start.
You do. The book just assumes that battlefield victory is, well, it's perfectly analogous to securing market share and industry dominance. The logic is, if these principles work for generals in ancient China, they have to work for CEOs today.
Okay, let's unpack that because that is a mighty philosophical leap to make. What gives McNeely the credibility to even try?
I think the author's background is absolutely key here. McNeely has this dual expertise. He's a former infantry officer, so he gets strategy in a very literal sense, and he's also a seasoned corporate strategist. So this isn't some academic thought experiment. He's seen both sides of it, the military and the commercial trenches, so to speak.
It's also interesting is the timeline. The original book came out in 1996. In digital terms, that's ancient history. We're looking at the 2012 revisions. So
Right.
why the refresh? Did the ancient wisdom not hold up?
Oh, the wisdom holds up, but the battlefield changed completely. That 2012 revision was crucial because the competitive landscape was just fundamentally new. Think about the shifts in those 16 years. Globalization became so much more intense, the internet became the central nervous system for all of commerce.
And you had the rise of cooperative alliances,
Yeah.
competitors becoming partners.
Exactly. And of course, the massive economic rise of China. These were dynamic changes that were almost unthinkable in the mid-90s. A strategy guide from 96 just couldn't account for things like Alibaba or today's supply chain complexities. So McNeely updated the case studies to show the maxims still apply, even in this hyper-connected new world.
That sets the stage perfectly. So the core of the book is distilled into 6 strategic principles from Sun Tzu that McNeely claims will lead to business success. Let's jump into the first 3. These seem to focus on avoiding direct, costly conflict.
And these 3 really define the whole Sun Tzu mentality. For him, actual direct conflict is a failure of planning. It's costly in blood, treasure, morale. The goal is always to win through positioning and maneuver, not just grinding the other guy down.
Which brings us to principle 1, probably the most famous Sun Tzu quote applied to business, winning without fighting.
In a corporate context, he defines this as capturing your market without destroying it. It's the ultimate expression of dominance.
Yeah.
If you get into a head-to-head price war or some brutal marketing battle, yeah, you might win. But you've probably crippled your own profits and devalued the entire market in the process.
But doesn't that just sound a bit like common sense? What's the strategic finesse here beyond just don't start price wars?
The finesse is in achieving a kind of strategic leverage that makes resistance from your competitor either impossible or just pointless. Think about creating a proprietary standard or locking up essential IP so completely that no one can even enter your market without your okay. It's about building moats so wide the competitor just turns back before the battle even starts. You win with preparation, not brute force.
That flows perfectly into the second principle. You can't always just sit in your fortress. So the next step is avoiding strength, attacking weakness.
Pure flanking strategy. You absolutely do not want to go head-to-head with the market leader where they're strongest. Attacking a competitor's fortress, their flagship product, their main distribution network, that's a high-cost, low-yield fight.
So if they're strong in one area, you pivot. You strike where they're spread thin.
Precisely. You hit them where they least expect it. Success comes from finding those vulnerabilities, an overlooked customer segment, a weakness in their customer service, maybe some outdated tech. You find the soft underbelly, not the reinforced concrete.
And to do that, you absolutely need visibility. You need intel.
Right.
Which brings us to principle 3, employing deception and foreknowledge.
Right. This is all about maximizing the power of market information. Foreknowledge is the obvious part. Knowing the market, your competitors, your own capabilities, that's just competitive intelligence 101.
But the word deception is where this gets really interesting and maybe a little messy in a modern corporate world. What does he mean by deception?
Well, we have to move past the idea of hiding troops in the forest. In business, deception is more like strategic ambiguity, competitive bluffing, maybe the calculated release of selective information. You might say, leak rumors of a huge investment in one product line to get your competitor to shift their resources there, while your real plan is to strike in a totally different, undefended area.
So you're manipulating their perception of reality, masking your true objective until it's too late for them to react. That elevates intelligence from just passive information gathering to an active weapon.
And if you look at those first three principles together, they create a picture of an intelligence-led preemptive strategy. It's all about preparing the environment and minimizing the cost of conflict.
Okay, moving to the second half of the framework. The final three principles seem to shift focus more toward decisive action and the internal character needed to pull it all off. Let's look at principle 4, using speed and preparation.
This is such a critical pairing. It's about moving swiftly to overcome competitors. But speed without preparation is just chaos. Preparation ensures that when that opportunity, that gap, appears in the market, you can actually execute quickly and decisively.
I see a tension there, though. Preparation takes time. Deliberation. Speed means acting before you have all the information. How do you balance that?
That's the strategic tightrope, isn't it? Preparation means having your resources, your funding, your talent, your infrastructure pre-positioned, ready to go. Speed is the tempo of execution. If your competitor needs 3 months to launch a defensive move and you can launch your attack in 3 weeks because you were prepared, you've won. You're moving faster than their decision cycle.
Principle 5 takes us back to external action, and it's pretty aggressive, shaping your opponent. This isn't just reacting, it's about mastering them.
This is where you go beyond just defense or flanking. You're now taking proactive steps to deliberately influence and constrain what your competitor can even do. For example, if you know they rely on a specific supplier, maybe you go out and secure a long-term exclusive deal with that supplier. You've just limited their freedom and raised their costs.
So you're not just waiting for them to make a mistake, you're actively building the fence that forces them into a smaller, less advantageous position.
Exactly. You're setting the terms of engagement through structural action, not just a market response.
And finally, we turn inward for the last principle because none of this matters if your own organization is a mess. Displaying character-based leadership.
This is the foundation for everything else. It's about providing effective, steady leadership, especially in turbulent times. A strategy like this requires unwavering internal cohesion and trust. If the team doesn't trust the leaders, the whole thing will fracture the moment real pressure hits. Without it, the other 5 principles are they're just not going to be executed effectively or ethically.
So McNeely lays out this complete 6-step framework. Now, let's pivot a bit to how the book actually delivers all this information.
Well, the book is almost universally praised for its style. It's brisk, it's engaging, very easy to follow, and McNeely's structure is very effective. He juxtaposes modern business case studies with ancient military history. It really makes the principles stick.
And for a manager who actually wants to use this stuff, it's built for application, right? The source material says it has a practical section to help you build your own strategy. Plus, it includes Samuel B. Griffith's translation of The Art of War itself. That's a lot of value.
It's a very complete package. However, while the structure is engaging, the sources also bring up some pretty significant critiques about its analytical depth, which we really should talk about.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The main critique seems to be that while the parallels are engaging, the whole approach can feel oversimplified. It lacks a certain critical analysis. Why is that?
It feels like a structural issue, driven by that desire to be accessible. To make the framework so clean and easy to digest, he has to lean on all these case studies. But when you include so many histories, both business and military, you inevitably have to minimize their individual complexities.
So you're saying when you pull a really complex story out of its context, just to make it fit as an example for Principle 3 or whatever, the case study itself gets trivialized, the messy reality gets smoothed over.
Exactly. Real-world strategy is incredibly messy. It involves politics, luck, personalities. McNeely's approach has to clean all that up to fit the 6 steps. So for a serious student of strategy, it might feel like it sacrifices depth for accessibility.
That's a powerful point. And if we're doing a deep dive, we have to ask what's missing from this simplified framework. What crucial parts of modern competition get left out?
Critically, there's very little discussion on risk assessment. Every strategic move, in war or in business, carries huge risks of failure, of backlash, of financial ruin. A guide that doesn't help you assess and mitigate that risk is giving you an incomplete picture.
And what's the second big omission?
It's the dynamic nature of strategy. The book doesn't talk enough about how your competitor might react to any of these principles. Strategy isn't a checklist you execute in a vacuum. If you make a brilliant flanking move, you have to spend just as much time anticipating their countermove. Without that, you're missing a huge variable.
So we land on a pretty clear conclusion about who this book is for. If you want a simple, approachable way to apply military philosophy to business, it's a huge success. It gives a busy manager a powerful new lens.
Yes, but because of that simplification and the missing pieces like risk assessment, it probably appeals more to a general audience than to a serious, established strategist who needs deep tactical guidance. It's a great mnemonic, but it's not a comprehensive planning guide.
So what does this all mean for you as you navigate your own corporate battles? The value of McNeely's work is its clarity. He takes ancient wisdom and compresses it into a 6-step framework that makes timeless strategy feel surprisingly simple for a busy manager.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. If we accept the book's core analogy, that market share really is the modern battlefield victory, then we have to think about those critiques. If a company builds its full strategy on these ancient maxims, but omits robust risk assessment and detailed competitor reaction modeling, what does that do to the long-term viability of that strategy?
And think about this. What modern complexities, things like heavy government regulation, international partnerships, sustainability demands, what parts of modern business just can't be captured by a purely competitive win-without-fighting mentality? Does modern strategy require not just a translation of the ancient texts, but a fundamental evolution beyond them?
Something to mull over as you decide if your next big move is an act of war or an act of calculated cooperation.
Thank you for sharing your sources with us and letting us take this deep dive into Sun Tzu's surprising longevity in the world of business.